Welcome to Loup TV. I'm Gene along with Andrew for Thursday, January 27th. The topic today is an easy one. It's Apple's earnings. I couldn't think of a better person to do it with than Andrew. We've been through a lot of these together. Something in life that never gets old is that anticipation before Apple comes out with their numbers. What was your take when the numbers hit?
Well, the anticipation was about supply chain constraints. And I think every product driven company has had that looming over their earnings and stock expectations and results expectations over the last few weeks. So we were concerned that Apple would be talking a lot about supply chain constraints and the impact on the business. Sure enough, they were able to power through that and then some, driving a really strong quarter. The one-liner in my world, or in my opinion, is that the Apple freight train just keeps on rolling. How about you, Gene? What was your high-level take on the December quarter results?
I think it's the same setup, by the way, too. I was more anxious than typical, just given what we've seen with other big tech and how the market reaction has been to decent numbers. Then, of course, with the supply chain, some of the headwinds that they're dealing with, you never know how this is going to play out. And, you just got to go back to the Apple playbook. They find ways of powering through. And it was an impressive quarter, and it is a vintage classic Apple type of a quarter in the sense that some of these best quarters, it's hard to really capture how good it is, but I'm going to take an effort at it here, is that they beat the street by 5%, which is impressive in any quarter. They said that the headwind for the December quarter was greater than the headwind in the supply chain that it was in the September quarter. They said it was 6 billion in September. So it could have been 7 or 8 billion. We've been tracking these lead times and they really haven't improved much throughout the quarter. And so I suspect that it was a decent number. When you start to factor in those elements, they could have, without that headwind, they could have beaten by 11%. Now, granted, maybe the street numbers would be a little bit different if that were the case, if there was no supply chain issues, but it just was impressive. I mean, as you said, the freight train keeps coming. They powered right through it, and they did it in a way that was more profitable. They had almost 200 basis point upside to their gross margin that really caught my attention, despite what was, in Tim Cook's estimation, a very elevated logistics environment. And they didn't raise prices during the quarter and still did all of that. It was quite remarkable.
And how about with the March quarter guidance? What was your take on that as you digest it?
Overall, it was more upbeat than I was expecting, in part because that supply chain headwind. They said that it would continue into the September quarter. The magnitude of it would be less than it was in December. So if you just kind of do the quick math here, I talked about maybe 7 billion plus impact in the December quarter. They said it would be less. The revenue line is less in September, so maybe it's a 3.5 billion, let's say, impact in the March quarter. And they also said, Lucas said that it would be up from where it was. It'd be a record March quarter. And the street was essentially looking for a flat March quarter. They added on top of that there would be about a 3% FX headwind. And when you kind of string all those together, the street was at, call it 90.7 billion. But if you kind of normalize for the supply chain, the FX, and some of their commentary, they probably could have guided to 100 billion and call it up 10% or 12% year over year, which is just incredible off of these hard comps to continue to be growing at this pace, despite the headwinds, and doing it profitably. I think what really stood out to me was that March guidance. And it took the street a couple times from Luca on the call to kind of fully explain, myself included, exactly how they're trying to communicate with the guidance. But you kind of saw the light go on in the after hours trading as the stock started to drift higher as he clarified his commentary about the March quarter.
Seems like the market loves the March quarter guidance. A couple things that stood out to me were the fact that 1.8 billion people on the planet are using an Apple device. And of them, 785 million are subscribing to some type of Apple service. The other thing that caught my ear was the commentary on 5G and how few iPhone users are actually using 5G. So how early we are in that upgrade cycle. Um, how
Mhm.
about for you? What stood out in the commentary and the rest of the call?
I think that that 1.8 billion active device number that stood out to me too. That was up 9% year over year. They grew it in the previous year. They came out the same metric a year ago and it was up 10%. And so you basically had kind of a similar type of growth rate off of higher numbers. So they're kind of defying the law of large numbers there. It reminds me of just almost like how Facebook grows its user base. It just powers on, and we continue to see that. I think the Mac number, even though the Mac is small, call it 12% of revenue, it stood out. It was the upside in it. I think they had like 14% upside. It was 25% revenue growth, and we were tracking these lead times. I mean, some of these Macs are out 30, 40 days, and they're still doing that. So that stood out. And then I think that the last piece, of course, is just that profitability with, I mean, everything coming at you. We talked about it with not only the supply chain, what's going on in logistics and costs of shipping, but undoubtedly they're running into other costs every time they turn around, and yet they're still able to move margins higher. I think it speaks to what are improving manufacturing efficiencies at some level. They're probably costs, surprisingly, are probably going down on the component side. You almost have to have that in order for that margin upside to show through. So it is they're running devices like software like margins, and it's really encouraging.
Well, let's head into the toy department here quickly. What do you think of Cook's commentary on the metaverse question?
Well, first thing that caught my mind is he didn't object to the word metaverse. I understand that it's a word that he doesn't particularly like. When I heard it, I thought this is going to be kind of fun to see if he course corrects off of metaverse, and he just quickly started talking about AR, which is kind of his proper operating procedures there. And he said that they're just continuing to invest. He talked about AR continuing to invest there. It's clear they're doing something. Of course, Bloomberg has been reported that headset, the MR headset, has been delayed till later this year. I suspect it's going to probably be in 2023 when we actually see the first prototype. So it's going to take time, but they're going to do something there. It was encouraging that he's staying on course in terms of what's going on there. And you kind of see this rift developing between Meta, Facebook, and kind of the metaverse language. And I think what Cook and Apple want to do, which is just keep coming back to we're augmented reality.
Yeah, I think he's got to anchor his commentary in what exists today, right? And for Apple, that's AR devices, AR apps, and things like that. But it was indicative, I think, that he went right to AR when talking about the metaverse and just kind of how they perceive it. So,
yeah, and I think I think forms of the metaverse exist today. And to your point, is he's ignoring it because they have the kind of the script that they want to follow.
and what about comments on other products, other upcoming products, or lack of comments on new products?
It's pretty much cut and paste from other conference calls, and they say the same thing, which is we want to continue to go for big markets that have bring hardware, software, and services together. You know, you come back to AR, you know, come back to the car. We know they're working on it. We don't know if it's actually going to come out. I can say that as I've thought more about what's happened with Tesla recently, I've thought more just about the overall auto industry, thought about Apple and how its shares have moved around more recently. You know, there really isn't much built in regarding the car. It did have a step up when that reporting was happening in the fall of last year, but I think for the most part, this is still greenfield. I mean, they are still, it's hard to imagine a company this size to still have massive growth opportunities that aren't appreciated by investors. But I think they're in front of Apple and they're going to go for it. Whether they get out the door or not, it's another question. But Cook's comments were on par to, I think, kind of continue to suggest that they're going to move towards that goal.
All right, last topic is just Apple's ability to navigate probably a record challenge in the supply chain. What was your take on his answer to the question around supply chain strategy? And also, what do you think their ability to navigate the supply chain means for the rest of the market and the concerns that people have had on tech companies navigating that same supply chain?
On the latter, I don't think it's their commentary that it's still out there but easy, and I don't think that that's comforting to really anybody else. Just because, of course, Apple and the relationship they have, the pole position they have with their suppliers. So I think this is an Apple benefiting more than anything. And I think Katie Huberty, I believe she's the one that asked the question. I think she was going for is to hear more about Apple diversifying their supply chain outside of Asia, and Cook didn't go there. He didn't take the bait. He basically said that it's a chip shortage problem, and we're feeling a little bit better about that. And I think if you kind of fill in the blanks around that, is Apple's doing more. They've been talking for the last few years about doing more in the U.S., and they are doing more in the U.S. But this is still the vast majority of everything that goes on with Apple is still coming from Asia. And I mean, my guess is, if you look at just the products revenue, back out services, you're still talking about 90% of everything is coming through Asia. Not surprising. I just think it's a really tough order. It's going to take a decade to do that. I think Apple does want to do that, but unfortunately, it's not going to happen anytime soon. And Cook did the right thing. A lot of nice things. Said a lot of nice things about China and how that business is done. It was up 21% year over year. It's doing great, and Apple's benefiting from everything that's going on over there from a sales side too. So, I guess as they would say, don't rock the boat.
Do you think Apple will pull the market higher tomorrow?
I do. I mean, I felt like they just bailed us out, bailed the tech
Mhm.
market out, and I mean it just kind of, if you just look at how earnings have been going so far, I think we've had more wins, and this is the biggest win for sure. If Apple would have had some issues, look out. And it's one of those things where they're not going to get full credit for what they did. If in a normal environment, given the stock pullback, if it was a kind of a baseline environment, the stock would be up 10%. It's probably going to be up 5-7%, something like that. Maybe it fades during the day, who knows? But I think it was really good. It was impressive. I'm not one to keep layering on adjectives, but it's hard to come up with the right ones. They did it, and I'm glad for it. And congratulations, Apple.
All right. Well, thanks, Gene. I'll play us out here. For Gene, I'm Andrew. Thanks for joining.